Welcome back, everyone. In this video, we're going to focus on resiliency of our design with ASA application running on FPR4100 appliance in failover active standby, complemented with our FTD application running as standalone NGIPS. We'll focus on data link resiliency as well as failover link resiliency for our ASAs. Before I get into things here, I want to mention here that we are leveraging all port channels in our design, but same setup is supported with individual interfaces. So for example, here on top with ASAs, you can have individual 40 gig links into a single switch or a 10 gig link, right? You can also use a port channel, for example, into a single switch without doing this with VPC. Same goes between interconnects ASA to FTD. You can have single links and on the bottom of FTD as well. So our first test we're going to look at here is we have connectivity north of our ASAs with two VPCs. We're going to look at bringing down this two links and bringing down the data plane for that primary active ASA, and we'll capture how many packets do we lose in this case. We have our ASA failover units here, and they have interface monitoring enabled, as you see here. Same goes on the standby mate. We can see that those interfaces in two contexts are monitored. If we take a look at our host here, what I have here on host A, I am receiving from host B UDP packets. This will help us measure how many packets we lose. And the same goes from host A. I am sending to host C UDP packets here showing up there. Besides those connections, I have some SSH connections in place from host A to host C and running top to make sure that I capture if those sessions freeze, and there's also some pings going as well. So let's get into our failover setup here. If we take a look at our FXOS, we have green ports on all of our chassis. So let's start out by first going back to our diagram, removing these two ports and seeing how many we lose. We are going to bring down Ethernet 1.1 port on each switch to actually take out the VPC 110. So here on switch 1, we're going to just quickly look at the port channels here. We have our port channel 10 and 20. We're going to bring down the port channel 10 on both units by shutting down ETH 1.1. So I will just try to synchronize this between the two units here. So I'll shut down this one and shut down the other one. And here we can see that we lost about 3 packets, and ASA had transitioned from active to standby. Just to make things easy, I'll do no shut on those ports to make sure that they come back. But on the chassis managers, we would see that ASA1 unit would lose that VPC. These ports going red usually take about 20 to 30 seconds, so we're not going to wait for that. On ASAs themselves, we had seen that interface check had become okay. So if I look at my show failover again, I can see that some of those interfaces are still in waiting for context 1 and context 2 outside. We'll wait for those interfaces to go to monitored state before we proceed to bring down the data plane for the other units. Just checking on our SSH connections, everything is in place. And as we saw here, we lost about 3 seconds of traffic. So going back to our monitored interfaces here, we can see that all interfaces are now monitored. So we'll proceed to bring down the ports on port channel 11, which is port 13, and this will bring down data plane for ASA 2. Going back to our diagram here, our secondary unit is active, and we'll just focus on bringing down the east 13 as well to see how that transition goes. Interface 13, shut it down, and on our switch 1, also do a shut. So looking at our ASAs, they have gone from active to standby, and in this case we lost about 4 packets in this transition. So you can see that directly connected ASAs into the switches, that's the transition that I have going on. If we look at how quickly they are noticing that there is a transition going on between the 2 units, is we have our hold time for failover set to 300 milliseconds and hold time to 1 second. So we basically tuned it down very closely to monitor the 2 units. Now we're going to do no shut on those units, and we're going to focus actually on south port channels of our ASAs. So in this case, we're looking at our interconnects with FTD running NGIPS and doing port pairing between these port channels. So what we're going to do on the switches here, we're going to be shutting down our left path by shutting down the ports that belong into the VPC 130. So here we have our FTD that's going to propagate the shutting down of those ports onto the north side of FTD, and in turn bring down that primary unit ASA. So here you can see we will first remove the FTD by removing that bottom port channel 20, and then in turn that will propagate the link state onto port channel 10 and bringing it down for the ASA as well. So let's take a look at our ASA again, make sure that we have our monitored interfaces. We do. Everything is back up. So looking at our switch itself here, in our port channel summary here, this particular port channel 30, Ethernet 1.5 is what is connected to our FTD1. So we'll focus on that port and shut it down on both sides. And let's see how quickly does ASA pick that up. So here we have detected a switchover on ASA, and we lost about 5 packets in this case because we have FTD in our path. It had to actually transition the link state propagation. So that took an additional couple of seconds there before the HA occurred. All of our connections are still up. TCP connections, UDP, you can see that transition captured there. We will do no shut on those interfaces of FTD. And if we look at our chassis manager here, we can see that it shows both port channels in red here. All the ports actually went down and propagated as expected because they're an inline pair. Now the FTD2 is our active path. So once everything is up and running and ASAs have monitored interfaces, we have our interface check going okay. If I do a show failover here, we're still waiting on interfaces to be monitored. And now we can focus on the right path through our ASA FTD2 and FTD2. That's port channel 31, and that's port E17 on both sides. So in this case, I will shut down both of these ports and see that transition happen again. So here, we had seen the transition happen. It's a little faster this time. It was only about 3 packets that we had lost in UDP. Our TCP connections survived that transition. If we take a look at our FXOS, our FTD1 is all green, and FTD2 would be showing all red ports very soon here. As you can see, the operational state of the port channel 10 and 20 is already in failed. So this will in turn lead to shutdown ports as well and going red. So this was our data links resiliency. We had tested north side of ASA, also the south side of ASA, and going both from left to right and right to left. Now we'll just do one more test by failing the link that's cross-connected between the 2 units for failover link and LAN. That's Ethernet 1.8. So we have our connections running, and what we'll do in this case is simply go on our FXOS for ASA1 that's currently active and bring down the failover port. So as we do that, we see that the failover LAN has failed, but these 2 units are still monitoring and they can see that they're there over the interface itself, the data interfaces. So they are in failed state on the secondary on the right, and they're actually primary is active in this case. So things are still going fine, no issues here. TCP connection survived, everything survived. If I go back and actually enable that link to ensure they can talk again, they will detect that their failover link became fine, and they will establish that failover state again. Currently, we're going through a sync of the configuration, but they will become again active standby ready. So you can see that we're back to our normal operation. We haven't lost any packets on our UDP, and TCP connections had survived. So that is our check of resiliency with our data links and the failover link. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you.